So, in the last episode, Free Will Part 1, we talked about how there is an initial thought kernel that is not generated by free will. And so now we're going to talk about some of the blockages to exercising free will as we would like it to be executed. I think the first limiting factor is our actual definition or perception of free will. So, if someone says we have no free will at all and everything is deterministic, it, in a sense, relieves the person of responsibilities for ownership and authorship of their actions through free will, right? So it's not really a practical model to use for the average person. Another aspect of that is that, as we've seen with balance, you can break down the snapshot of everything that was involved with free will to a very minute scale. But also, within that same neighborhood are people that say that, let's say decisions. Okay, so they said, well, you're not making the decision. The decision is decided nanoseconds or fraction of a second before you did it, so you don't even know you were going to do it. So basically, they, I forget the exact study, but they tested people like with pressing a button or something, and their brain was already executing the commands before they said that they were doing the thing, the pressing or something like that. It was proving that the conscious mind was not initiating the movement when it thought it was. There was a delay because the actual command was being given to the body before the conscious mind decided, quote unquote, to do it, right? The problem with this, in a practical sense, is that there are many processes within the body that this could be applied to. So you could get to the point where you say, well, you not only didn't decide, initially to make this movement or do this thing, but, the sandwich that you made, the entire sandwich was based on your low blood sugar. Your body demanded food, and so you weren't responsible for any of those actions because your endocrine system and all the other, biological systems were forcing you to do this thing, to make the sandwich. It was all driven by subconscious bodily forces, right? And this also relinquishes ownership and ultimate responsibility of our actions. There has to be some kind of gradient in which we can say, I did this thing, the buck stops with me, I was responsible. So those are two models that, even the fact that they're factual, okay, yes, we execute decisions first outside of our conscious mind. Even when we're using free will, there's a delayed cognitive awareness of our actions, okay? That gets baked into our definition of free will, okay? It's a couple nanoseconds, so we're lumping it, right? We're saying that on the human level of perception, when we executed the thought is when the free will was activated, not before when we couldn't perceive it, because then we couldn't claim it as our actions. The same is true, now we're going to have to get into discipline. So some of the blockages of getting the results you want using your own free will, the first being, like I was saying, the perception of what free will is. if you are going to discount those lags or those areas in which you're saying it was something else, and not the initiation of that second thought based on that first kernel, then you get into this gray area where it's very hard to say, the person was responsible. So the perception of the free will is the first possible stumbling block. One of the primary stumbling blocks that I mentioned before is discipline. But along with the discipline, you have to realize that some things cannot be spontaneously acquired. Why do we love superheroes that get instant power? Because they didn't have to earn it. They were just an average person going about their day, and something happened to them. They get bit by a spider, and they instantly have superpowers. They didn't have to slog through. Batman works for his abilities, and they're all based on his native limits. Okay, he uses gadgets and stuff that extend his native limits, but if he's, there and just in his bat suit, it's his native limits, right? Superman, as soon as he came to Earth, because of the sun and everything, he instantaneously had these powers. So that's not how things work with humans, okay? The only way you can spontaneously get any abilities is if you are using some substance to give you it, right? So you wake up in the morning and you go get your morning coffee. You drink the coffee, and within, however long it takes to metabolize the caffeine, you have a higher level of, I think it's called ergogenic, the ability to do work. You're focused. The endocene, I think it's called, the sleep, hormone, you're blocking that or whatever the caffeine does. It's almost like a little boost of superpowers, right? Or let's say, I think this is all fictionalized, but, when they inject adrenaline directly into the dude's heart and he jumps up and does all this crazy stuff and lifts cars and stuff. My point is, like in the movie Limitless, there would have to be an exterior, exogenous chemical of some sort, or substance, or process, or, they have these electronic stimulators now that they're using to treat depression that go on, it's like a TENS unit on the outside of the head. They use them to treat migraines and stuff like that. So it would have to be something exterior to you that would activate or supplement your native abilities, okay? That means that to execute your free will, to exercise your free will in the way that you envision it or wish it to happen, sometimes requires training. And the degree to which you can exercise your free will be dependent upon how long you trained, how well you trained, the level, your skill levels, okay? So using the long distance running thing as an example, if I had been training, I could, like Jason Bourne, I know I can run for half an hour flat out before I start shaking or whatever. He had the training, and then he knew his limitations. And of course, we can say, well, there's an extra, 20-30% in there, whatever, the reserves, right? The other thing is, even with the training, if you've never pushed yourself to completely use those reserves, which is probably unhealthy, but you still don't know your absolute limit to spontaneous, exercising your free will. So you can't spontaneously acquire abilities. You can't spontaneously extend your native abilities or states without substances. And you cannot really tap into your reserve abilities and free will unless you have trained, because you won't have the stamina, you'll gas out, you know what I mean? It just will not be accessible to you. This also extends to situations which, pretty rare for the typical person, but situations in which you need to control your heart rate, or similar bodily systems that can really only be trained through, let's say, meditation or using biofeedback units. The biofeedback units, you can learn to control your heart rate and, brain states. Okay, so they say that someone that's meditated for like something like 10 years can go into, I think it's theta or alpha. They can reach these deep levels of like meditative brain waves very quickly because they've done it for so long. You and me, Joe Schmoes, are not going to be able to do that. So when there's like, let's say, a disaster and, an earthquake or something and you're panicking and stuff, the average person will not be able to throw themselves into a meditative state spontaneously. Okay. And they won't be able to slow their heart rate on demand and these other things. Like I said, this is rare happenstances, but I'm just saying it is a factor in the exercising of free will if you're looking at the total picture of what you might want to achieve with your free will. So those are some of the negatives or limiting factors, right? So you're saying, okay, I got it. The first kernel, not free will, but it feels like free will. So I'm just going to either ignore it or treat it like free will and just move on to the next question or thought or action. And I'm on my way and I'll do the chain of events dedicated to that free will decision. And then boom, I'll reach my goal, right? So you say, one day you're like, maybe I'll go to college. And then you say, yes, I'm going to go to college. Because the idea is starting to appeal to you. And you use your free will to decide at every major point to exercise your willpower to move your body to the college and take the class and slog through it and everything. And then in the end, you either, stop going or you get a degree, but then that chain of free will is over, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I have had many, many, many times in my life that I did not complete things, or I thought I couldn't, or I crapped out or just stopped doing things that initially I really wanted to do. So looking back on those losses, or some of them were negative events, but I mean they're not bad. They're just the balance of what happened, right? And looking at that balance, a lot of it was based on not thinking I had control of my actions. Okay, thinking that external forces, circumstances, were what was dictating most of my responses. But in actuality, we actually have a lot of control over the facets that maximize free will and free will power. So we'll start with the most boring yet necessary and work our way up to the more exotic, okay? The baseline for maintaining free willpower, I like to call it, is diet, sleep, and exercise, right? If you're eating foods, and I'm very guilty of this, if you're eating foods that spike your blood sugar or are very sugar laden, or bad for your digestion or whatever, then that is going to reduce the amount of energy and reliable blood sugar that you have to do things. Okay, it's going to decrease your motivation. If you eat a huge meal, you're not going to want to go out and seize the day. Okay, you're going to want to take a nap, right? So diet is huge. If you eat the right foods, you have more energy. If you eat the wrong foods, many of the clocks in your body will not run in the proper manner, and you could, get diseases and other things that will reduce your potential to exercise your free will. So it's pretty straightforward. Water, you need to be hydrated for your cells to work properly, for your brain to function properly. People talk about brain fog. You can get that just from being dehydrated. If you look at the symptoms of malnutrition and dehydration, you can see that if we just fed people properly and they were hydrated, it would relieve a lot of the things that have, problems with concentration and a bunch of other things, right? And the same can be said for exercise. If you're out of shape, it limits the work your body can do. If you think of like reps, sets and reps and stuff, it's going to limit those. Okay, it's going to limit how many miles you can run. It's going to limit if you're in a situation where you have to lift something off of someone else, right? Like let's say there's a cave in or something and there's this big rock and you got to move it and try to get it off of someone. That's not something you can spontaneously generate. You're going to be able to lift it to the limit of your physical fitness plus the adrenaline plus whatever percentage, the hidden percentage you can eke out, okay, because you're all, panicked and stuff. If you were in shape, you would be able to lift more, and it would be less taxing on your body and less damaging to your joints and all this stuff, right? So diet, exercise, hydration, those things alone will decrease the negative impact on your body's system that could be used as excuses in a way to rationalize you not getting things done. Okay, so you could say in your head, you're like, I need to do my homework, right? That's the kernel, okay, saying, hey, you need to do your homework. And then your logical mind is the one that is going to add to that thought. So if you just ate a Big Mac and you're out of shape, and you're going to be less likely to just jump on the homework, or, you need to fix your car, you're going to be like, I'll fix it tomorrow, right? And procrastinate. So it affects your willpower, which is the energy you need to exercise your free will's like requests, okay? Because your mind is going to make requests of your body, and without those things satisfied, the food, the sleep, the hydration, you were going to be, your abilities will be decreased, okay? The other thing that anyone can do, or is free to do, right, is something like meditation or yoga. Something that stills the mind, that gives time periods of reduced thought and rumination and stuff like that. Again, they're talking about the people that meditated for X amount of years. That affects some of the benefits you can get from shorter periods, I remember when I didn't meditate my whole life until maybe a couple of years ago, and I got that the Insight Timer app, right? My best friend introduced me to it. I'm like, I don't know, I've tried meditation, but that I was able to custom make this, sound routine, right? It would start with a bell and it would just have this wow, 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 background noise and end with a bell. So meditation for me was amazing, and I got benefits from it very quickly. And that is one way of extending your native's abilities, so to speak. Okay, and this will be an example from my own life. Okay, I would do this meditation where I would be sitting there, visualizing myself. That God with all the arms. Okay, I forget which one it was, the Hindu god. But I was at work, and I would imagine myself catching falling bottles, right? I would imagine, this glass bottle fell, and I go to catch it, very proficiently, let's say, okay? And it was just an exercise, and I was experimenting with all kinds of exercises. But this started working at work. Like, I would be at work, and a bottle would fall, and I would, it would fall on my left side, and I would, reach over with my right arm and catch it in the, very, very subconscious way, and I'd be like, wow, that was pretty amazing catch, like a ninja catch. And this has been proven out in people that visualize creative visualization sports. Okay, they visualize themselves doing the exercises, shooting the hoop or whatever, or running high jump or whatever, and then they do better in that activity because the mind doesn't know the difference between the visualization and the activity, right? So meditation and other, yoga and practices like that still the mind give you more chances to create the windows of consciousness we were talking about. They make you more aware of your body and your surroundings and just the world in general. So you also have physical training. You have, if you want to be able to defend yourself proficiently, that's also not something you're going to spontaneously do unless you're just naturally a badass. But if you studied martial arts for a year, you would be that much quicker, faster, better than an untrained person. So now you're in a scenario where, this guy, let's say someone steps to you and is like, hey man, it's just like a troublemaker. And you think, your thought is, he's going to throw a punch at me, right? That's the kernel, the first idea. And then your free will takes over from there, and your willpower, because you have trained subconsciously for this event, okay? Your reaction time is going to be, twice this guy's speed if he's untrained. And so your free will is, the thought is, I need to survive this. Okay, I need to get out of this in one piece. And then the willpower will executing the subconscious muscle memory and other things you have, and you will get a higher percentage or deliverable of your free will desire for that effect, if that makes sense. So we have diet, exercise, hydration, taking care of the physical body. We have stilling the mind with meditation and things like that. We have physical training for things like sports and self-defense and, reaction times. And then the biggest thing for me is the discipline part. This really is like a mental muscle that is very hard to spontaneously flex. And there are, this is probably would be the most desired outcome for people of their free will, is to be disciplined, because discipline is like the key that unlocks all these other things, right? No matter what your goal is, barring disaster or barring you just giving up, the only thing that will really stop you is you, okay? Yes, you have native limits, okay? You're not going to exceed those native limits, like I said, without some form of exterior equipment or substance or something else that, extends and enhances your native limits, right? So basically with discipline, the whole point is that you have the kernel thought, okay? I want to become a pilot, right? If you base your willpower steps off of the fact that you know nothing about airplanes, that you know nothing about flying, that you're just going off of what you've seen in like movies and TV and heard from people, there is a good chance that you may just give up, and it may become like a daydream, right? If you really want to become a pilot, you have to find out what those steps are, and then you have to find out the specifics, the details. Make a plan and execute the plan in the order of the events, okay? And then you will arrive at your desired outcome. Really, at that point, the only thing that will keep you from it is if you have miscalculated, if you have bad data about the steps that need to be taken, okay? So next we're going to talk about the why, maybe the how, of how to analyze ourselves and others using balance and free will and all that.